the key takeaway I think from fear is to try and live in the moment and be present. And to do that is, again, that's something that you cultivate over time, because presence is a practice. So staying present and not getting stuck and attached to stories and to future based outcomes, that takes work. So part of the work is looking inside and seeing what you need to do to remove some of those things that we get stuck to in life.
David, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Daniel. Happy to be here.
Thanks for being here. I was looking forward to this conversation. As I was telling you off cameras, I read your life story, and I felt that you had so much insights and wisdom about overcoming traumas, knowing how to deal with emotions and feelings, especially for men. But before we dive into, tell me a little bit about your life story and how you got to this point where you needed to find some change in your life.
Yeah, so I grew up in Canada, just outside of Toronto. Um, and you want me to discuss the trauma, I suppose. So yeah, when I was a kid, I was playing competitive hockey, and my father passed away of a massive heart attack, driving me onto a hockey game. So that was a traumatic experience that led to a number of um, sort of lifestyle adjustments and changes I had to make along the way to deal with that traumatic event.
Yeah, when I was reading that part, it seems like we we are not taught to know how to deal with grief, how to deal with trauma, and the only thing that we know how to do is to find something to cope with, whether it is video games. In your case, I think it was just hockey, right? That you were full like all in into your hockey career.
Yeah, yeah, I ended up playing. I just kept on playing hockey. I kind of poured my, it's funny you say that. Yeah, in our culture, especially in sport, there's a huge um, misconception that it's bad to feel for a man, especially for a man. I mean, even for women too, for the most part. But in competitive sports, especially a rough sport that has a lot of body contact, and there's a lot of injuries. Usually, when you're playing a sport like that, you get injured, and especially hockey players, you'll see a guy take 5, 6 stitches in the face, and he'll get sewn up and get back out there, which is fine. But when it comes to things that happen off the ice, like you mentioned, grief. So, say someone passes away. In my instance, it was my father at a young age. We're not really taught to move through an emotion such as grief. And then when you take it one step further, some of the health professionals and people that are that people that are needing help, they're not really trained so much in trauma. It's always people go and see someone for, say, a mental illness or something, and a lot of times the person that's treating that person knows how to treat that symptom, but they don't know how to dive deep and get to the root cause, which in most mental illness cases it's trauma. So I think there's a huge conversation happening right now, which is great because there's so much social media and podcasting going on, where men are realizing, or some men. I mean, it's still, if you look at pulp culture, it's still very there's still a very masculine tone to our culture, but the conversation is starting to happen where men are realizing that to move through trauma. And most people have had some sort of trauma in their life at some point. A lot of people come from homes where there's physical abuse, or one of the parents was an alcoholic, or even divorce. There's varying degrees of trauma, but everybody's had something. And now I think people are realizing that to work through that trauma, it has to be, you have to look inside, and it's an internal healing process. And a lot of times, to heal, one of the first steps is for men to look inside and learn how to really feel and get in touch with their emotional energy and their emotional wounds and traumas.
Oh, that is absolutely true what you're saying when it comes to men in society, especially for sports. Well, hockey being one of the toughest sports where assault is almost kind of legal when people can just start fighting and it's all exciting, all good. But we never. I don't know if we are afraid of trying to be open with another person, but when it comes to the masculinity and be tough and all of that, it feels like when you white knuckle your way through life and you push through emotional traumas, I think there is a sense of pride among men. Like, I'm strong and I didn't let this pull me down. The problem is, as you have experienced, and many people have, is that at some point that bill comes due. At some point, your body's going to tell you, we cannot continue like this, and you find yourself in substance abuse, or just dealing deep in depression. How do you how can men break that cycle of, because it's an identity, right? It's like, I'm strong. I've been Imagine in your case, David, you were 15 when your dad passed away, and then you did for 10, 15 years just pushing through, white knuckling through your life, and that was your identity. Changing that, unless you really want to do it, which in your case you did, helping other people to change that narrative is hard.
Yeah, like you made some valid points about what's happening out there. I mean, trauma is something that happens. As I said, happens to a lot of people. And in my case, I used addictions to suppress some, because most things that they happen to us, Daniel, it's usually there's an energy component in our bodies that we suppress. Emotions are just energy that want to come and move through us. We want to feel them and release them. But if it's a powerful emotion such as trauma or something really negative that happened, in most cases we want to the body's the body's response is to push that energy down. And then again, our social conditioning doesn't really accept men to show their vulnerability and to say, for example, to cry. So in a lot of cases, there's so much painful emotions it wants to come up through. Say, there's lots of ways to release it, but say through crying is one way. And if men are conditioned that it's not okay to cry and show their emotions or their feelings, what happens is that energy has to be pushed down. And in my case, I used work and alcohol in multiple relationships. And you see that being played out in our society on a mass scale. There's so many men, especially, who are heavily addicted to all sorts of things like work and alcohol. Like in my case, there's pornography, there's shopping, there's cocaine, there's opioids. Like the list goes on. And I think what the message here and how do you move through that, I think the first thing is our culture, and men have to realize is and accept that it's okay to reach out for help, and it's okay to move through some of these emotions and let them out through tears and crying. And you don't have to hold a stiff upper lip and, like you call it, white knuckle through your life, because what happens at some point if you don't deal with some of this emotional energy is it becomes an illness in the body, because that energy gets stuck, and then we can't move the chi or the prana or the energy through our body.
No, I agree with that, and you see it more. I mean, now more than ever. I think that I was just looking at the CDC numbers for 2022, and I think close to 50,000 people committed suicide, and close to, what, 80% of them were men. So, and these numbers keep increasing. So you have portion of substance abuse, whether it's just alcohol, drugs, it could be pornography, it could be work, it could be just different relationship, but also can lead to depression and eventually suicide. And at that point is, okay, we have a big problem, but we're not treating it the right way. It's just like, in your case, you did a lot with an Eastern culture. You went to India and you found different ways, different from the West, I guess, that you could just heal through those traumas. Heal. What do you learn uh, from those trips or from that experience of changing that identity and just reframing your mindset so you can deal through your traumas and experiences from the past?
Yeah, there's no quick fix to work through um, traumas and release addictions. Everyone has different journeys, and my method may work great for me. It may not work for others. I mean, in most cases, though, the wisdom that I learned over the years, spending time in India and California, working with some amazing teachers and gurus and shamans and such, is that it is an inside job, and you have to go inside to you have to first off build some sort of self-awareness, and self-awareness is not something you just snap your fingers and you turn on a switch and you become self-aware. It takes some work and some reflection, and again, part of it is just sitting through some of those painful emotions and having them release, and then from there you start to create more awareness in the body, because you have more space to work through some of stresses that life will bring.
Yeah, and how can you help somebody, because you are a coach as well? How can you help somebody gaining more self-awareness? Because it's easy to say, well, for some people it comes easier than other ones, but if you have lived 20, 30, 40, 50 years with very little self-awareness, how do you help those people to gain more awareness?
I mean, it's a process, and again, it's not a like again, our culture's programmed, Daniel, for this quick fix. So we like to go see someone in a white coat and get a medication, and we're healed. And that, unfortunately, you're going after the symptom. You're not getting to the root cause or the root issue, which in most cases, again, is a trauma based energy or experience that someone has happened to them. And again, our people that the mainstream Western model are not really trained to work with trauma. I mean, that's changing. I'm not saying everybody, but for the most part, um, our system, if you even look at sort of the psychiatric system in North America, it's a drugging, pharmaceutical based solution, which in some cases is needed, but in many cases, long term, it's not the answer. The answer is to help someone build that self awareness. Coming back to your question, um, the methods that I use are very holistic in their approach. Just a few things I can share with you that I do work with when I do coach clients that are the main people I work with are going through burnout or high stress or high anxiety. And when I peel back the layers and get them to go through sort of a life history, there's usually something that happened that's causing this burnout and the stress. Because there's a lot of high achievers that accomplish a lot during the day and they don't feel burnt out and stressed. So it's a changing our approach to the way we work and practicing more self love and self awareness. So the first thing I teach people is to and it sounds selfish, but to put themselves number one and love themselves first before anything else, because you can't show up in your life for your family or for your kids or for your career or your friends if you're not taking care of yourself. So self love is the first component to my philosophy and my teaching, and with the self love, from that stems things like say a daily practice of releasing emotions, and that could be through movement, that could be through sound, that could be through breath, that could be through journaling and writing, just self reflection, and that in most cases, once you learn some of these practices to look inside through those methods, again through breath and through say journaling, for example, then that's the healing process begins.
You said two interesting things over there that I want to touch on. One of them was the self love, that it seems to be even harder for men. We're just it's not that unless you're a narcissistic person, right? It is very hard to practice self love, and I think it's just a skill set that you need to acquire and practice, and eventually it will come. If you don't put yourself as a priority, then you cannot show up for other people. That is number one. And second, when you mention burnout, it's interesting because I feel that people have a different definition of burnout, and it could be attached to different things. The other day I was watching a podcast with, do you know who Dr. K is? He has a YouTube channel called Healthy Gamer. He's a Indian American psychologist or psychotherapist who just helps a lot of streamers, a lot of gamers. Anyhow, he was talking about burnout because he used to help a lot of wealthy clients go through burnout, and his definition was burnout was when you put a ton of work, a ton of effort, but you don't see to gain any progress. So in his case, he said, I could work a 72-hour shift on the emergency room from Friday morning to Monday morning, and I wouldn't be burnout. But put me on the phone for 45 minutes with an insurance company trying to get approval for a medication for a patient, and I'll feel burnout. What? Because it's like I'm not advanced. It's just so hard, and that's why I wanted to get your definition of burnout for yourself, because I know that in your case, you felt at some point that you were successful at your job, you love your job, I mean, you were happily married with your love of your life, and yet you felt burnout. What was the feeling like?
So in most cases that I see people, it starts to manifest physically because some of these most of the stuff happens to us when we're burnt out. We tend to lose some of our sleep habits, or for me, the sleep started to go, and then when the sleep goes, that can steamroll into not wanting to exercise and losing some of the daily routines or practices that are so helpful to keep you from burnout. So I think for a lot of people, physically they start just to get sick, and um, again, my approach is very holistic, and I look at why there's an illness there, and I use Ayurveda. Ayurveda is one of the tools that I use to help people stay in balance, and a lot of Ayurveda is just plugging into figuring out what your physiology is, and then plugging into the circadian rhythms of life and matching your lifestyle with the circadian rhythms of life. When I say circadian rhythms of life, just for an example, the sun sets, we should be in bed, say by 9:30, 10 o'clock. And when the sun rises, we should be up at 5:30, 6 a.m. Little things like that. We're conditioned in our culture to have our largest meal at night. So we eat a lot of steak and potatoes, and people come home and have wine, and they have these big meals. And then as we get older, our digestive fire, our ama, is not very strong. We do not digest the food late at night. So little things like, say, having your largest meal during the middle of the day. Well, a lot of people are burnt out. They don't even stop for lunch. So I make shifts in people's lifestyles to help them become healthy. And a lot of times burnout is just people spending too much time on something, like you mentioned, that they don't enjoy. And the reason they do that is because, again, there's something that they're avoiding in their life that they don't want to look at. And in many cases.
Yeah, and as you said, to me, sleep has been one of the best things that have applied to my life. I've been dealing with depression for the last 2.5 years or so, and it's still ups and downs here and there. But just creating a schedule, just going to bed 10, 11, waking up at 6, 7, just trying to keep that consistency to some extent can help other areas of your life. And I guess people don't give sleep enough credit for that. It's like, I can sleep 5, 6 hours and be okay and be functionable, but that starts affecting your your emotional, I mean, system, or your limbic system to some extent, and your mood, and your stress and all of that. But when I was reading about it, you said that you were feeling a void during those times before you start seeking help from more like an Eastern type of approach. What was that void like?
Um, I guess I mean, it was almost like I was sort of ambivalent to how I was feeling. Like there was a numbness there that I was not aware of. And then when I started to physically not feel great, in terms of my health, that's when I realized there was many voids that needed to be filled. And the way I was filling them through, working too much or drinking too much, and getting in and out of relationships, was not a positive way to fill those voids. But for me, it took, there's an old saying, sometimes you have to sort of fall flat on your face before you can get back up again. So you kind of have to, or hit rock bottom, before you can start to heal. So for me, it was sort of a rock bottom moment in terms of my physical health. And that's when I realized there was many voids that needed to be looked at. Um, and through Eastern philosophies, those are the ones that work for me, because it allowed me to learn how to build more self-awareness and self-reflection.
Okay, so after feeling numb, because I think that happens quite a bit when you see your life outside looking in. You seem to be having a great life. You have a great job. You're making, you know, you have a beautiful wife. You're happily married. You're doing all of it, and yet you feel not unfulfilled, but you feel like an emptiness, and something there is trying to get resolved, but you haven't figured that out yet. So, what do you learn from the Eastern holistic approach when it comes to healing your inner self?
Yeah, again, I think a lot of our conditioning. I mean, just look at our advertising agency. Their philosophy is to show people happy with all these things, like a new car, or the new house, or the perfect vacation, the perfect wife. All these things are very external. So we're conditioned at a very young age to look outside of ourselves for happiness. Even food, like the food commercials, are all based on, hey, you're going to be happy when you go eat this, Big Mac, and you're going to go to the playground and see, Ronald McDonald and all these things, and you're going to get this brand new Mercedes, and that's going to bring the woman of your dreams, and you're going to feel happy. So I think a lot of our conditioning is based on external. So we're taught that most of the happiness and fulfillment in life in the North American um, culture is based on filling it with materialistic acquisitions, or degrees or accolades or whatever it may be. They're usually very external um, things we're taught is going to make us happy. And I think for me and for a lot of people, once they reach that pinnacle of success, you've heard that saying, you reach the top of the ladder and you realize the ladder's been up against the wrong wall. So people start to reach pinnacles of success, and they realize that once they've got it, is this what I was, killing myself for this, award or this degree or this job title, whatever it may be, or this house. Um, so I think once people have that realization, they start to make a shift, and it usually takes an event such as an illness or maybe a divorce or a job loss or whatever, maybe something traumatic for them to um, reset their mindset and realize that they have to start to look inside, and for many people that can be very scary because that's where a lot of the emotions can be, the ones that have been suppressed are held.
Yeah, and when you talk about it, just all this outside, it's like what I can have, whether is the fancy car or the big house or this I'm at a VP or CFO or CEO. All that, it's all outside. It's all the ego. It seems like this culture, the North American culture, feeds a lot of the ego, and we care a lot what other people think about us. We care a lot of things how we are perceived, and we're always competing. But one thing that you said was very interesting, and I've heard that from a lot of uh, people that have reached some level of success, or even extremely wealthy people. It's like, yeah, once you have the the Lamborghini, once you have the mansion, once you have all this, you realize you still feel empty inside. You still realize that you're not happy, that success wasn't the thing that was going to give you happiness. However, I feel that people won't listen to that until they actually experience that. It's like, yeah, David, you can say all of this to me. You built a 7-figure business and all of that, but maybe you're different, or maybe I'm different. So I need to prove to myself that that is the case. So until I reach that level and I realize, you know what, David was right. It's all emptiness. I need to work on myself. I feel that that is the pushback from a lot of people feeling that, well, if I have all this money, I'll be different.
Yeah, I mean, experience can be the best teacher. I mean, sometimes you have to go through things in your life. I mean, I can tell you 10 things, and you may not, some of them may not resonate until you actually experience them in your own life. That's why, experience is our best teachers in life. However, you can also save yourself years by modeling other people's behaviors. And one of the lessons I've learned, I mean, just to give you an example, I had a friend over here that does Ayurvedic massage, and he said something to me very, very simple but profound. He said, if I had $1 billion in the bank right now, I would still be giving these Ayurvedic treatments. And I thought to myself, well, that's interesting because, I mean, I just spent 9 weeks. I went on a tour through North America, took a little bit of time off in a custom made RV. And I met many people that have been traveling for a long time. And some of the themes that I realized is that for at least for me anyway, I couldn't do that forever. I couldn't just sit on a beach and drink, pina coladas for the rest of my life. I think you have to, two things. If I could give advice to younger people, is you have to find something that you really enjoy and you're passionate about, and also sometimes that gives you a sense of purpose. Because making money at the end of the day is great, and we all need money. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, there's that's one of the needs that we all have. However, I think when you combine purpose and you can even combine being a service to humanity, that's when it becomes more fulfilling and more powerful. And that's when you get the true abundance, not just materially, but also it starts to feed your soul.
No, it's just it is like that. And what you're saying, that's one of the reasons why I created the podcast. Is I've been I've been doing most, the way I've been living my life is just trial and error a lot. It's like, well, what if I can learn from other people that I've already walked the walk, and then I mean, I might not take every piece of advice, but then I can see where they made those mistakes. Maybe I can avoid it. And as you said, maybe I can save some years of my life of pain down the road. But yeah, one thing that I heard from who was it? I think it was this. Well, actually, I read it on Twitter. This person said, if you win the lottery tomorrow, would you still be doing what you're doing today? So if the answer is yes, then you're going to be fine. You'll find fulfillment, as you said, on what you're doing. But then if you feel, no, I'm not going to I'm not going to work as an extra day in my life, well, you can only play golf for so much, and you can only spend so many days at the beach. At some point, you're going to feel that emptiness. You need that purpose that makes you excited to start your day and to push. So I understand perfectly that friend of yours that said, "Yeah, if I had $1 billion, I'd still be doing this because if not, I'll be just sad and depressed at home or at the beach or somewhere else."
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's an aspect that as I get older, I realize I have more time, say during the day, because I'm doing things that I like to do and I choose to do. But to sit around and do nothing all day is challenging. I mean, this we've been conditioned to retire at 65, and that's starting to change. You're seeing a lot of people working longer, and the ones that are working longer, in most cases, are the ones that don't have to work, like in terms of finance, but they enjoy it. Like I have a father-in-law who's 85 years old. He's a one of the leading voice coaches in Canada, and he still coaches 3 to 5 people a week. And he doesn't do it for the money. He does it because he's passionate about it, and he loves helping people. So that's the key in life, is to figure out what brings you a sense of peace and fulfillment and purpose and service to humanity, and then you'll want to do it forever. You won't want to retire. There's an old saying. It says a proverb. It says, "Find what you love to do. You'll never work a day in your life." And I think again, there's some conditioning as young kids. We're really conditioned to be at school at a certain time and learn and memorize certain subjects and get a good job and pay taxes and there's an element to that we all need to do. And some people thrive in that environment, but in many cases, there are a lot of people that were conditioned that if they don't do that, they're not going to have abundance. There's going to be lack in their life, and I think you have to get, and that's a hard one for men because there's multi generations that have gone through, say, depressions, and you've had the Irish potato famine. There's so we're brought up with fathers and grandfathers and great grandfathers that went through times where economically it was very challenging. So as men, a lot of men I meet, and even in my own life, one of the challenges is realizing that the universe is abundant, and when you tap into that, that's when you can really experience the abundance of the universe. But if you're in a place of fear and lack, and you're for example, you're afraid to quit your corporate job because you're not going to eat and this and that. I mean, there's ways of doing things that you love to do, and maybe a corporate job is for you. Again, it wasn't for me, but some people thrive in that environment. um, but if you don't, and you're looking for something that you really want to do, that you're passionate about and will bring you abundance, sometimes you have to do it. Some people come to me with advice and say, "How do I start a business?" or "How do I get into this place of finding something that I'm passionate about?" And sometimes you have to do it part time till you build up, customers or a following or whatever it may be, before you can quit your job. But if you're passionate about it and there's a viable business or market for what you're doing, then there's no reason why you shouldn't be doing that.
Absolutely. In fact, you said two things that I wanted to touch on. One of them was that you still see people late into the 60s, 70s, and 80s still working, even if they don't have to. And it's clear evidence that many people, once they retire, a year or two later, they just pass away. They just
Yeah.
died. It, they have no other purpose in life, and that was keeping them alive. Well, look at Warren Buffett. He's like, what, 98? uh, and still working. Charlie Munger, his business partner, who passed away, I think last year, he worked until his very last day. Is what keeps them, and that and none, and neither of these two needed to work an extra day in their life for the last 30, 40 years. But that's what kept them alive to some extent. And the second point was about I wouldn't say follow your passion or anything. Because a lot of people struggle with, well, I don't know what my passion is, but follow something that you like. And I heard this quote a long time ago that I started applying to my life. It's like, if you're good at something that you hate, imagine how good you would be at something that you enjoy and like doing. And I think that a lot of people need to take that leap of faith, whether it's, as you said, start part time and start creating a business. But life is just one, man. And if you're doing something that you don't like just because you like the safety of having that job, when you're 50, 60, 70, 80, you're probably going to regret at the end of the day. And in your case, you say, hey, I'm out of here. In your case, how was that transition when you realized that the corporate job was not your place?
Um, for me, as a fairly young age, I didn't I was not good. I would like the freedom of my own hours and freedom of. I mean, to me, 2 weeks vacation and having to be somewhere at 9 and stay till 5, when a lot of times I could get the job done in half of that time, and I could take time off. I didn't like the rules around it, and the a lot of the people moving up the mobility in corporations. A lot of it was political, so I didn't enjoy that part of things. So I knew I wanted to do something on my own. And you touched on a couple things before I go deep into that. Is that when you keep your mind active into your older age, that keeps you healthy. Like, you're right. Some people stop working, they die. So a lot of these people that work well into their 70s and 80s and 90s, they were very productive in their latter years, and that keeps them healthy, keeps their mind active. And the mind and the body, there's a huge connection to that. So when your mind's active and working and productive, and your memory strong, then your body's going to be strong as well. So I think there's a huge component to health and working um, past when you're 65. I mean, some people, though, they love retirement. Like, there's no gold standard here. You have to do what I'm saying. Or some people golf every day, or they find a hobby that they love to do. I think the main thing is keep moving and keep your mind and your body active. And then back to the finding something that you love to do. Um, I mean, there's that, but you also have to do something that you're good at, like you mentioned. And if you're good at it, you want to become the best at it. So you want to keep taking courses, or keep refining your skills. Because if you're the best at what you do, or you're good at what you do, then you're going to be successful. And I mean, you still have to have you still have to produce as a person. And if you're not good at what you're doing, chances are you're not going to produce very much. So that's one of the key elements, I think, is finding something you love, and then refining your skills to becoming the best in your field, or striving to be the best, and looking at others that are doing what you're doing at a higher level, and keep learning from them and applying that to your own skill set.
Yeah, and that can take some time. That can take some time, and I guess that's why a lot of people quit before they see some benefits or see some rewards. It takes time to build a business, as you know. It takes some time to learn a new skill, or even if you're decent at it, even if you're good, just to master something and make a living out of it takes time. And you have all these stories in your head that we all have, these self doubts, these things. But I like to touch that point of the stories we tell ourselves, and and the belief systems we have. Because when you, something that you mentioned earlier about how for so many it was so hard to break that pattern. Someone, let's say somebody that is in their 40s or 50s or 60s, that has a lot of stories on traumas and things, and he hasn't been able to even take a look at the Pandora box they have inside because of this fear, or even they don't even acknowledge. How do you help, break that pattern and feel like, well, it is hard, but I can still work through it, even though my identity has been attached to this piece of story I've been telling myself for decades?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I don't like talking about my childhood and my story, because we can be our identities can be created around our stories. And sometimes the best way to move forward in your life is to forget those stories. I mean, once you've worked through them, and move on. Because when you get stuck in a story, that then you get stuck in a pattern, and those patterns sometimes can be almost like looping. You're just like a dog chasing its tail, so to speak. So I think it's important to the first step is to heal from our past and our traumas, but don't use that story for, become a victim for the rest of our lives. And in terms of, once we've done the work and moved through it, then you have to get out there and try. And there's no, everybody that's become successful, they didn't do it their first week or their first year in most cases. Like, it's usually a 5 or 10 year story. And you want to fail. Again, our culture teaches us that if you fail, then you quit and you hide under a rock and go back to who you were. But failure is a good thing. It allows you to learn from. You want to learn from your failures, not give up on them. So you want to fail often. And when you fail, you just keep failing, keep failing. The more you fail, the more you're going to get up and be successful. But it's not a race, and it's not a get rich quick thing. Some people are lucky and they may hit a home run their first year or two, but in my experience, it's usually 5 to 10 years is a typical successful sales career or business career, or just about anything. It takes time to get good at your craft. And one of the key things that I was fortunate to learn from a mentor is when you first get out there and try, you know, don't don't think, don't be afraid of trying. Like, you're gonna look like someone that's never done it before. That and you just keep polishing yourself and polishing yourself. I remember the first video I did a long time ago when I first started coaching, and I look at it now, and I don't do as many videos now, but the first one I did was awful, and I didn't want to do them. I was terrified of the camera, and but the more I did it, the more I got more comfortable with doing it. It's the same with anything. You have to just you have to have the courage to start, and once you start, then you get better and better and better and better and better over time.
Yeah, I think it's harder nowadays because of the mindset of the instant gratification. It's just I want it now. We are bombarded by what we see on social media of a bunch of people, their highlight reel, maybe what they would call overnight success. Well, it took 10 years, and then you see now with the person inside. What you don't see is the journey that took them there. So I can see how a lot of people feel frustrated. They feel that they're not good enough. They feel that they're not never, or they're never going to reach success, because you say, I tried for 6 months, I tried a year, and nothing happened. But as you said, it's having that patience and just keep grinding and keep going. But touching to the point, when you mentioned about that fear of, even in your case, making the first video and being afraid of the camera and all of that, yes, a lot of us, including myself, have a ton of fears that is so hard to push through. You being a coach, and you have helped a lot of people, how do you help them to overcome that fear of, and that is basically holding them back and lead them to inaction?
Yeah, I mean, we all have fears in our lives, and I've we the way I've worked through them is just to do it. Like, just find an ounce of courage to do something that you're afraid of. And then, there's an old saying: 90% of the things we, or 99% of the things we worry about don't usually happen, and the 1% that do happen, we have literally no control over them. So um, I think a lot of the stuff that we have as fear in our minds is a future based projection on something that we think is going to go wrong. And we're all programmed like that as humans because we have that in our DNA. But if you think about it, one of the keys to fear is just staying present. And when you're present, there's, because a lot of, we're not our thoughts, and most fear energy is a thought, and it's usually a thought about the future. So if you can live in a place of presence, and not get attached to your thoughts or your stories, we touched on that earlier. Don't get attached to your thoughts or your stories, and stay in the moment. Then there's no fear, because you and I are talking right now at this second. Do you have anything to be fearful of right now?
Nope.
Do I? No. We're engaged in conversation, and that's what you want to try and bring this energy into your life, like how we are right now. You want to stay present in the moment, because at this time, in this moment, there's nothing that can could go wrong. I mean, and if it did go wrong, it's nothing that you and I can control. Like, I could fall over and die, or you could fall over and die, or there could be a bomb that goes up. But most of the things that could happen are out of our control. So the key takeaway I think from fear is to try and live in the moment and be present. And to do that is, again, that's something that you cultivate over time, because presence is a practice. So staying present and not getting stuck and attached to stories and to future based outcomes, that takes work. So part of the work is looking inside and seeing what you need to do to remove some of those things that we get stuck to in life.
Totally. And what techniques do you use to bring yourself back to the present moment? Because you could be either stuck in the past or in the future. That's where most people are. And I know there are some techniques and everyone is different, but what do you do to bring yourself back and stay more in the present, especially if you're by yourself?
Yeah. So thoughts are the most powerful thing. One of the most powerful things we have control over. So you can do a couple things. You can say stop. Like if you're in a negative cycle in a loop, or stop, delete, cancel. Like there's an old Huna Honopono prayer that they used to use in Hawaii many years ago, and it says what it is your conscious is talking to your subconscious. Your subconscious is that fear or that thought that's coming up, and you say to that thought, "I love you," which is really the inner child. "I'm sorry you're having this thought or this story. Um, I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I forgive you for having this, and then thank you, like it's been done." So that's one method. You can use a prayer. You can use a mantra. You can just you can say Om to yourself. Anything to break that thought pattern, because thoughts are the thing that we can change, and we have to treat our minds like gardens. And when those thoughts come up that are negative and fearful, those are the weeds that we don't want in our mind, and we have to pull them out and stop them immediately. So just that practice of saying stop, delete, and you can have a mantra, you can have a number of different things. There's no right or wrong mantra or way to stop them, but to stop them in their tracks. And I'm not going there. That's not who I am anymore. Is one. For example, that's the old me. That's not the new me. I'm not entertaining this thought process. Goodbye. Things like that. You can also stop and take a deep breath. You can go out for a walk into nature, because if you look at nature, there's no fear there. They just sort of, nature just does what it does. And the flowers rise in the spring, and the leaves fall in the fall, and nature doesn't push or fear. It's always very present. So there's so many different practices, Daniel, and there's no one that's right or wrong. It's whatever works for you. But I think the main thing is that you stay persistent and patient with the practice of stopping that fear in its tracks. And maybe even there's lots of things. For example, you can think about the worst case scenario that could happen and write it down. Like, what's the worst thing that can happen here? And sometimes when we know that I read a book. Someone interviewed Richard Branson and all these very successful business people, and one of the practices they use before they invest millions and millions of dollars into a project is they say, okay, what's the worst thing that can happen if this goes offside or doesn't work out? And knowing what the downside is, then you can make a decision that's much better, and then you can make a decision that's not based around fear. So, for example, let's say someone's fearful of it could be anything, and you just say to yourself, okay, what's the worst case scenario here? And once you paint that picture of the worst case scenario and you realize it's not all that bad, then a lot of times the fear goes away.
I like that. I like those two techniques. One for the past and one for the future. It's like for the past, I'm not that person anymore. As you said, it requires practice. It requires patience, because at the beginning you're going to feel weird about it, because you're changing all stories, all patterns, all behaviors, and creating like a new identity based on who you are today, not who you were 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And the second one is that a lot of us have tons of fears just foreseeing the future, trying to imagine what is going to happen in a week from now, in 6 months, in a year. It's like, well, what's the worst case scenario? Even with the worst, are we okay with that? And if you're not okay with that, then try to do something else. Because at the end of the day, as you said, most of the things are outside our control anyway. David, one thing I wanted to ask you, because it seems like I know you're not a therapist or anything like that, or an expert, but you do have, is what it seems outside looking in, a great marriage, a great relationship. What are the keys for a successful marriage, especially nowadays that it seems that the divorce rates are, I mean, and they keep going up.
Yeah, I think that's, I think one of the most important decisions a young guy or woman can make is choosing the right partner, because you're not going to be successful if you're married to someone that's crazy or hasn't worked through their stuff. I mean, one of the things that I work with on my clients is working on themselves. And when you're in a relationship and you work on yourself, the energy between you and your partner starts to shift. So a lot of times in many relationships, there's a projection of that person's inner pain or turmoil or trauma, and it gets projected on the other person. So a lot of times in relationships, it's about working on your own self and improving yourself and working through your own challenges and your own traumas and your own stresses. And once you do that, then the other person's feels your energy shift and their energy starts to shift. But I think it has to work both ways. Like the other person has to be all in on working on themselves as well. So for what's worked with my wife and I is she's given me the space to work on my stuff, and she's got stuff too. And I've given her the space to work on her stuff. And then, there's a mutual respect that we each have for each other. And then we also, we like doing similar activities. Like we like RVing, for example. We like to take trips in an RV. We love dogs. I mean, if I met her and she hated dogs and I love dogs and she, loved cats and I hated cats, chances are, she wouldn't want to get a dog and I wouldn't want to get a cat. So little things like that, like having, before you make a decision to marry someone, make sure you get that out on paper, what you want your life to look like. So for example, if you're with someone that wants 10 kids and you're on the fence about having kids, then chances are you shouldn't marry that person. You should
Yeah.
you should have some things carved out before you enter into a, because it's a lifelong business arrangement. It's a lifelong marriage. I mean, most people that go through financial issues, the two causes are bankruptcy in business and divorce. People don't talk about that side of it. And there's a lot of times, just for an example, a man will look outside his wife, say for an affair or something, when a lot of it's nothing to do with who he's married to. It's to do with his own stuff. So he's using an affair to deal with his own painful stuff. So I think the biggest takeaway that I would tell people on relationship stuff is work on yourself, and the one, and then second is make sure you pick the person that's on the same page as you with some um, key points, how you want your life to see in terms of like number of kids, where you're going to live, how many hours you're going to work, or some people like to, for example, my wife and I, if we work corporate jobs, I don't think we'd be as happy as we are. We work together and we spend a lot of time with each other. But other people, that may not work for them. So I think having a clear um, understanding of what your life is going to look like before you get married, and then also work on yourself before you get married, and even while you're married. Like it's not a 1 year thing. It's a long-term journey to work on your stuff. And if you think all your stuff's worked out, then chances are you're living, like you mentioned earlier, you're living from the ego and you're not in touch with your heart. If you're not in touch with your heart, then your relationship's definitely not going to work. So I think having the humbleness to realize that we're always going to have something that's going to come up in our life, and to keep working through that. And it doesn't mean you always have to have a mentor. It could mean working through it on your own. In a lot of cases, it helps to have mentors that are older and that have more experience, because again, you can model some of their behaviors and save yourself a lot of heartache. Like, just so for someone listening to this that's on the fence about getting married, this might save them, a future divorce. Like, no, just a couple of those. Like, it's simple advice, but it can be profound in how your life turns out.
Yeah, I like that. In fact, we tend to hear a lot. One of the things you said is like be on the same page. But one thing that is in my case, in my mind, even more important is that both party need to be working on themselves, because later on in the relationship, when things get tough, because we will hit highs and lows. When everything is high, everything is fine, but when you hit those low moments, all those fears, all those insecurities, all those traumas will uh, come up, and one of these two people are going to do things based on those unresolved issues that is going to affect the relationship, as you were mentioning. Maybe a guy is cheating on his wife. It's not because he's not attracted to his wife anymore, but that's the way that he's dealing with some whatever stuff that he has inside during a low point in a relationship. So both of them working is a very simple concept, but it's hard to have those people to agree, hey, I understand, let me work on myself, you work on yourself. And I feel that a lot of marriages could be saved if this was the foundation of that relationship.
Yeah, I concur. I agree with you. I agree with you. What you mentioned, you hit the nail on the head. A lot of people acting out in the marriage is usually unresolved emotional stuff inside and traumas that they haven't worked on. So they think by filling the void through an affair or cocaine or working too much or whatever, any unhealthy things that would not promote to a great marriage is gonna, not work. So that's the key. And our culture doesn't. I mean, I don't know what marriage counselors do. I'm knock on wood, I've never had to go to one. I hope that's some of the things that they're doing is as teaching men how to get in touch with their feelings and moving through some of that stuff, so they can have a more powerful, love based relationship with their partner.
So, David, I've been enjoying this conversation quite a bit. I've learned a lot, and I think that you have so many insights, so much wisdom on this conversation. But as a closing question, I would like to ask you, it's like, what is that one belief or behavior that has positively impacted your life? Let's say in the past 12 months.
Sometimes it's odd. You get messages from the universe that can be fairly subtle, but when you start to see the same one over and over again, you start to say, "Hey, maybe I should take note of this." So the one that's popping up in my life is of late is to have more faith. Faith that everything's going to work out. I met someone on a vacation. I met a preacher in Costa Rica, and his wife's name was Faith. And then, something else happened where someone gave me a book on faith, and then a third thing came up. I can't remember the third one was on faith, and it's like I said to myself, okay, there's something going on here. I need to start to manifest more faith in my life, because as a business owner, sometimes fear comes up about lack and the economy, um, and and just the general sort of world affairs right now. Living in Canada, we've had a lot of, in my view, just a leader that's sort of not doing the best thing for our country. And just having the faith that everything's going to work out. And sometimes we need to be brought into the dark, and before we can, some people need to be exposed to a lot of evil to realize that there is light on the other end of the tunnel, and more. So having more faith and optimism that things are going to work out. In all areas of my life. I just touched on a couple, but that's one of the key takeaways that I'm sort of working with right now, and I'm sure most people out there could benefit from that mindset or that shift. That again, worry is a wasted energy, and having faith is a much better way to to look at your life and have a better view of the world in general.
I love that, and it's true. I mean, we could have a much better life if we were more optimistic. Granted, sometimes it's hard when you get bombarded by negative news from all sorts of media, whether it's like traditional media, TV, newspaper, and or social media. So it's just hard to have that faith, as you said, that everything's gonna be fine, everything's gonna work out, and if it doesn't, I'll figure it out once I get there. So I completely love your answer, and it's the famous rule of three. At the third time that you hear or phrase the word faith, fine. I'll see what the universe is trying to tell me.
Exactly. Yeah.
Uh,
When things happen more than once, twice, when it's a third time, then you should start to pay attention.
yeah. So, David, once again, it was a pleasure to talk to you. Where can people find you if they want to work with you, if they want to I have you as a coach?
Yeah. So I work with a handful of people every year. So the program I offer is a 3 month program. It's a high investment in terms of finance. It's a high investment in terms of time. It's a results based program. It's for people that are struggling with stress and burnout and anxiety. They're looking for they're open to holistic ways to learn how to work through that. So that's who the program is meant for. It's usually people that are entrepreneurs or CEOs or people high in the high achievers, Daniel, but have a lot of stress, and they're looking for ways to still remain a high achiever but work through that stress. So my website's easy. It's awake, like the word awake, and then warrior.com. And all my social media channels are on that website. I have a growing Instagram following. I think it's David Lawson _ awake warrior, but you can find Instagram at awakewarrior.com. And then on my website, there's a few tabs where they can schedule a conversation to have a chat about what the coaching program would look like. There's no cost to the conversation, just it reviews what the program would look like for them. And I have one opening right now starting June the 1st. That's it for now. I may have another opening come September.
Excellent. Yes, I'll add all the information to the show notes. And once again, David, thank you for being on the podcast. And it
Yeah,
was a
thank you.
total pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, my pleasure, Daniel. It was a pleasure to
Okay.
speak with you, and I wish you well with the podcast. And I think you got a wonderful theme here and a topic, and I'm sure you'll continue to grow this. And I wish you all the best.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.